Well, one of the most obvious things for me with the staff is they call themselves teams. So it's a team that's taking care of my dad, and I think that helps with the staff morale.
Hi, I'm Agnes Stewicki, Managing Editor with Comfort Life. We're speaking with insiders from Canada's leading retirement communities and care providers to uncover insights to community lifestyle, care, culture, and leadership. This includes insights from residents, family members, and administration. This is the Comfort Life Insider Perspective.
Visually, as soon as you go in, it's obvious. The hallways are wider, the landscaping is amazing. And then once you get to know the community, there's the services that they provide, which are awesome. My dad actually happened to be in another home before he got to Riverside Glen, and the difference is night and day. One of the things that we really appreciate is the fact that he's allowed to participate. The management has taken him on board and loves listening to his suggestions and so on. So he's really enjoying the fact that they're not threatened by his input. Well, one of the things that they've let him do is participate in a podcast. So every second week they produce a podcast where they're interviewing seniors, and he's a co-host of that. So that's given him something to do, and it allows him to connect with the community, the larger community. In fact, the podcast spans all the Schlegel villages. Well, it was the first for him with the podcast, and but they come in and they set him all up, and he just has to get on the microphone and chat away. And with COVID, with everything being canceled and so on, they still allowed for the interviews to take place from his room, and so it's worked out really well. I like the size of the hallways. It makes it easy for the scooters to to be there. Um, his his room is actually a little small, but he has all the other facilities outside the room, like the library and the town hall and the chapel and so on. So they've set it up so that it's like a village. So he actually has a street name that he lives on, and and it just makes people feel like they're in a small village. And and as I say, they have a town hall where they can congregate for programs, and a chapel, and the post office is by the door, by the office, and so that is nice in itself. The nurses visit him for when he needs pills, and and he has a rash on his legs, so they come in and they put medication on his legs and so on. And so they just come in on, and he doesn't have to worry about the schedule. They know when he needs his pills, etc. As I say, the staff have gladly accepted his feedback, and he continues to look for ideas of how they can improve, and they listen to that. Well, as I say, he was in another home before he got to Riverside Glen, and he got to that other home because the hospital said he had to go into a home. And if he stayed in that home, I don't think he'd be with us today. The food was high salt content, and he was on a low salt diet, and etc. So since that was a year and a half ago, since he's been at Riverside Glen, since he's moved in, he hasn't had to complain about the food and the salt content. They assured him that was all taken care of. And and I think, as I say, the key for him is that he has a purpose and that he's heard. Well, his health did improve coming from the one home, and they have a doctor on staff, so he switched to the doctor on staff. So he has regular support that way. He's got a bit of a challenge right now, and he's going for tests for that, and so they support that. They're willing to bring in the X-rays into his room and the blood tests right to him. Although sometimes he goes out for them, they are prepared to bring all that right to him. Portable X-ray machines to bring into the room, and they bring in the lab people to take blood samples, etc. Well, one of the most obvious things for me with the staff is they call themselves teams. So it's a team that's taking care of my dad, and I think that helps with the staff morale. And the PSW and the nurse don't have a hierarchy per se. They're there to care for the resident, and so it's not like one is better than the other, and I value that. Well, in 2019 I actually was working in Saskatoon, and that's when his health started to deteriorate significantly, and so I had to leave work in Saskatoon and come back here. Fortunately, it worked out for me, and they kept me on, and I can work from home. But but when he was in the other home, it was terrible to see the conditions of the other home and what he was going through there. And so moving into Riverside Glen was a nice relief, and they communicate with us well. Like they tell us what the rules are of the day as the government changes the rules, for instance. And so I valued that. Well, I think it's the best of the services out there. I've been in other seniors' homes, and I really think that they do a good job. I like Riverside Glen because it's got the assisted care, but it's also got long-term care, so he can stay there. He actually chose to go into Riverside Glen because Riverside Glen offered open houses where they could come in and learn things about, for instance, creating a will. And they would offer free lunch and these open sessions to anybody in the neighborhood. And he used to live next door to Riverside Glen, and so he had formed a relationship with Riverside Glen long before. And I highly encourage that, if you can form a relationship with the seniors home before you move your parents in, because then it's not a big change. He knew the people, he had already socialized with the people before he moved in. And so I highly recommend that. Now, Riverside Glen I think is pricier than other places, but it provides services that meet that price requirement, I think. Yeah, I have a friend that's looking right now, and I would love for her to come to Riverside Glen but she doesn't live in Guelph, and so being near where they are is less of a change, I think. And so that, although having moved into Riverside Glen, there's such a community within Riverside Glen. I find my dad is not going out, especially with COVID, like he used to be. So it's a hurdle, but not as huge of hurdle as I thought to begin with. I think having choice of meals is a significant one, so that there's variety for what is required. I think having the nurses services and the PSW services is something that knowing the staff and knowing that they're going to be well taken care of is significant. And also, I find that activities are important. Even now, I told you about my dad's podcast and he's been contributed, but even now he's missing the volunteers that would come in pre-COVID. and because they would have all these other activities involved. So well, as I say, he had to go to another home beforehand, and so waiting to get in was stressful, I guess, for him, and he he couldn't wait to get into Riverside Glen, and and so it was a relief that he got there, and that he got there in time before COVID hit and shut everything down. So the timing was amazing for him in that. Well, as I say, with one of the things we thought about was the scooter and getting around with the scooter. The the services were there, and it was close to where he had already been for the hospital and for the doctors and for the nurses and for the bank and so on. So those were the key considerations when we were looking at that versus other homes, and even other homes in Guelph. He literally lived next door to Riverside Glen before he moved in. That was harder. We had a lot of stuff that we thought was would have value, and we couldn't sell it at the last minute, and so we ended up getting rid of a lot of stuff. I think there's companies like Max Sold out there that will come in and just sell everything for you and for a certain price. So, but we didn't use those. We hired a local mover that helped us with it. Um, he ended up getting a hospital bed because he had a double bed, and so he had to go to a smaller bed in a smaller room, and but his friend found a hospital bed, and so his friends rallied together and helped us with that whole move. They were there with a gift bag for him and a welcome to the room type of scenario. So that was wonderful. And I told you he had to move out of the wing because of COVID. And when he had to move out of his wing because of COVID, they actually moved him. They brought in the movers and moved and did all the work of moving. So I thought that was really nice of them. I don't think we would change. We might have moved him earlier so he didn't have to go to that first home. That I think that is the one of the things I recommend is that the decision to move into a home is made by the individual. The sooner that it's made by the individual, the better, so it doesn't have to be forced upon them. Um, so I think that would be the biggest difference. It would be the timing of it.
And how's the move, in summing up, how's the move worked out for your dad?
It's been good. One of those days when COVID was bad and he was locked in his room, I said, Dad, why don't you move in with me? And he thought, no, I'll lose my food regularly prepared, I'll lose the nurses' services and so on. So I think it's worked out well. And the fact that I'm allowed to go in even through COVID has been a godsend for us.
For more information about this community, you can visit their profile at comfortlife.ca.